What's going on? It's Big A the Manky Geek coming at you with another video, and in this one I'll be talking to you about, are comic book YouTubers killing the comic book industry? Now that title is a little bit misleading. It's from a Reddit post, but it really goes into a specific kind of comic book YouTuber. So this is the kind of comic book YouTuber who recites or retells the story of a comic. So it's that kind of content creator the post is kind of not critical of. Well, I suppose it's critical, and it's also analyzing as well. And I just came across it one day randomly, recently, like the other day, and I just thought it was interesting because I felt some of the responses to the article, which there'll be a link in the description, kind of dismissive. But essentially what I'm going to do is, well, go through it and read it and kind of assess each bit of it, and then in the comments, then obviously you can throw in your opinions on the piece as to what you think of it. But enough faffing about, let me get right into the meat and bones of it. Plenty of comic fans have proposed theories as to what's killing the comic book industry, and those theories have merit to them. But there's one problem that I haven't seen anyone mention. That is the impact comic book YouTubers have on the industry. Many comic book YouTubers, such as Comicstorian and ComicsExplained, don't review comics. They break the plots down in their totality. If I see one of their videos and I'm interested in the comic they talk about, I'll buy it afterwards, because I know I'll get more out of actually reading a story than I would just watching a video. But there are a lot of viewers who don't read comics regularly and or have never experienced what it's like to read a comic before. So they may not see a difference between watching an explanatory video and reading the comics themselves. This concerns me because I fear many fans view free YouTube videos as an alternative to buying and reading comics. I think that's 100% fair. It's like, I think there are definitely some people who would claim they can't afford to buy a comic and would therefore watch one of these videos and kind of not put any money towards kind of the industry. I kind of, the beginning of the article, the post, I totally see its point. It's got a good point. If there's hundreds of thousands of people watching these videos, then why aren't those same hundreds and thousands of people actually buying comics? It's like totally legit in my opinion. I think that's a good beginning to this. Tens to hundreds of thousands of people watch these videos daily, but the highest selling comics every week only reach around 200,000 copies sold at the most, according to Comicron.com, and only a couple of comics ever reach those numbers. Most successful series stay in the 50,000 to 100,000 range, plus there's no guarantee that a comic is even going to be purchased by customers. The site estimates retail shipments, not actual units sold. Marvel has also been known to overship comics for free in an attempt to boost their shipment statistics so they look more profitable. Suffice to say, the Marvel numbers can't be completely trusted. This issue has a larger effect on new stories than old ones. Older stories are well known and readily available outside of comic shops, so they're more likely to be purchased by general consumers. It's why comics are now paced for the trade. The sales reflect this, and videos explaining older stories probably aren't too much of a deterrent on their sales. But the real harm comes from videos made about current and ongoing comics. These already have a limited market, and these videos may be taking away potential customers. Again, I think that's totally fair. I mean, Doomsday Clock, for example, let's take Doomsday Clock. Great comic, I'm really enjoying it. 3 issues in, 4th issue I believe has been delayed. And yeah, to do kind of like a breakdown of the story of Doomsday Clock not too long after like the issues have come out, it's kind of like, is it potentially hurting the sales of the comic? I think that's a perfectly kind of valid hypothesis to analyze. I mean, the only way you'd really know is if you kind of cross-referenced the sales, actual sales, although that would be pretty hard to do, and the views of a video, and seeing as to kind of where the two intersect and as to which is higher. Because obviously if the video is higher than the amount of sales, you'd have to view it over a long period of time to actually see as to whether it's having an effect or not. But that is possible to do that, but it'll probably be quite lengthy. But again, perfectly reasonable argument in the post. The videos go into extreme detail about the storylines featured in each one, and in Comicstorian's case, they even show panels taken from the issues, albeit with dialogue removed. A lot of people who watch these videos have the mindset of, I already know what happens in the story now, so why bother spending money to read it? In some ways, they're actually right. The videos break down the stories beat by beat, so if a consumer doesn't want to spend the extra cash, he might just watch a video about the comic he was initially planning on buying. The industry suffers as a result, with sales tanking, yet viewership reaching new heights with each passing week. For example, two of the most popular comic YouTubers, who I've already mentioned, are Comicsexplained and Comicstorian. They both each made a separate video on Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps, Dark Knight's Metal tie-in, Fall of the Gods. The combined total of views on both of these videos was around 310,000. Comicsexplained video, with over 100,000 views, came on the same day as Hal Jordan and Green Lantern Corps, the issue 34. Naturally, that issue must have sold around 100,000 copies, if not more, based on people's apparent interest in the series. But that's not the case at all. Comicron lists the issue at less than 30,000 total shipments. The next issue, which was released just 2 weeks before Comicstorian's video, with nearly 200,000 views, garnered 200 less shipments than issue 34. Now, Comicron only lists physical comic shipments, not digital, but I seriously doubt that digital sales can make up for the other 280,000 viewers. Again, that's a good point. It's taking a lot of things into consideration. I think this article's totally fair. It's posing a question, and it's saying if these videos are getting so many views, why aren't that many people purchasing? Obviously, there's other factors involved. This wouldn't just be the one factor, but this potentially could be. I'm not saying that these are bad people, like Comicstorian and Comicsexplained. More power to them, do what you do, you know, retell the stories if you want. That's what people go to you for. That's great. But with everything going on in the comic book industry, is this one of the things that are kind of, well, not causing comics to tank, but have an effect on sales? How much of an effect? I don't know, but it seems like potentially it might have an effect. It might do. I mean, maybe this combined with pricing, people would rather watch a free video than pay however much a comic currently is at the moment. I totally forget how much a comic is, because I always think of it in pounds, not dollars. So what, £3.50, which that's a little bit on the pricier side. Me personally, I preferred it when comics were around the £2.50 mark, £2.70, not over £3. But it's very rare that I buy a comic that's not over £3 now. So that combined with the pricing and obviously some of the other stuff that's going on in the comics community, well, in comic books in general, could be having an effect, and I think that's totally fair. Here's another example. Super Sons 11 was released on December 20th, shipping under 40,000 copies. Then on January 10th, Comicstorian released the Super Sons story video, which received 100,000 plus views. It's paradoxical that comic sales are this low when there's such a great demand for superhero and comic themed content. Of course, this is in large part due to the fact that single issues aren't widely available outside of comic shops anymore. In the 90s, comics were being shifted from being sold in supermarkets to specialty stores. After the comics crash happened, most of those stores closed, and now physical single issue comics and back issues can only be found in a limited amount of comic shops across the country or on eBay. But it's not as if comic stores are that rare. If people went looking, they would find them. Just imagine what the comic industry would look like if each one of Comicsexplained's million subscribers all went out and bought the issues he talks about. I'm sure you get the picture. This is not an attack against any YouTubers or entertainers, and I'm not arguing that YouTubers shouldn't make comic story videos, although maybe they should consider waiting to do videos on newer comics until a few months have gone by. That way, fans will be forced to buy the comics if they want to keep up with their favorite universes. I ask this as an avid fan of online comic book content. Are comic book themed YouTubers hurting the industry? Well, I think this individual has come with a pretty good argument that this could actually be hurting sales to a degree. Like I mentioned earlier, I think if pricing dropped, then more people would be able to afford, and therefore more people would then spend their money on it. But it's weird. It's not like, some people would argue that watching Comics Explained or Comicstorian is like Netflix, so to speak. It's like a streaming service. But I would argue that it isn't like that, because if you subscribe to, say, for example, Comicsology have that kind of subscription, Comicsology Unlimited, I believe it's called. If you subscribe to that, that's like Netflix, because you're still paying, you're still putting your money down, and you're getting access to all these comics. That's the comic book version of Netflix. Whereas just watching a free video, that's not the same thing. You've had the entire story told to you without having to pay a dime. You sat through what, 1 or 2 20-second adverts, and then that was it. And like the article said, it's not even an article, it's a post, but like it said, it's cool that they do this. It's fine that they do this. It does mean that people have there's loads of people that were massive interest in comics. Hundreds of thousands of views means that there's hundreds of thousands of people who love comics, or at least are interested in comics. Some of them will currently be buying, others won't be. But how can we get all those people buying again? I think both Comicstorian and ComicsExplained, they have a power, an ability that as of yet I haven't seen used by either of them, but they could drive sales for certain books in the right direction. As far as and I mean, you know what I mean? If they kind of signal boost and say, yo, this book is dope or whatever. But then again, these are just retellers of stories. They're not really the kinds of people that viewers are going to for opinions, which I don't think is an invalid criticism at all. I mean, it's people go to be told stories, not to hear what this individual's opinion is. I mean, they could start doing that perhaps. Maybe they would lose some subscribers here and there, but because they pretty much remain neutral on a lot of things, which totally up to them if they want to remain neutral. But yeah, I think this article is totally, I keep calling it an article, it's not an article, it's a post. I think this post is completely kind of 100% fair. I think it presents some very good arguments. I'd like to hear as to what your thoughts on these arguments are, because I am kind of in agreement to a degree, but I don't think it's the #1 reason as to why not as many comics are being sold. I think if it is one of the kind of reasons, it's a very, very, very small part. The rest belongs to a larger pie, but I think it's just a snippet. And I mean, even though if it's just a snippet, you know, it still has an effect. But let me know as to what you think in the comments. Like, subscribe, share, hit the bell notification, watch another video if you want as well, and I'll see you on the next one.